Hey everyone, I'm Jacob with the Leaderboard, and today we're talking about Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life versus Stardew Valley. A lot has changed in the world of video games in the 14 years between these two games. We've harvested up all of the similarities and differences, but before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to become part of our notification squad. The similarities. Firstly, a note for purists. Today we'll be covering Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life for the Nintendo Gamecube because it was the best-selling game in the franchise. Now, with that in mind, let's get farming. When you consider that Eric Baroni has openly stated that Stardew Valley was inspired by Harvest Moon, there are bound to be some similarities between the two games. And by inspired, we mean that Eric Baroni literally said that he was making a clone of Harvest Moon when he was learning how to code in C#. As he became more experienced, he added more features to the game, but at its core, Stardew Valley was meant to be a Harvest Moon clone, so let's jump into the similarities. In both games, the player starts by inheriting a family farm near a quaint little town. Players can build up their farm by growing crops and raising livestock. Raising crops is fairly similar between the games too. You have to be mindful of seasons, water levels, and soil. When not farming, players can fish, mine, and forage for other items and materials outside of the farm and socialize with the townsfolk. A year in the life / time progression. A typical day in these games isn't much different than what you might expect. You wake up in the morning, water the crops, and take care of your other daily chores. Once that's done, you can do whatever you'd like in your free time, whether it means talking to villagers, fishing, or mining. The main difference is how time passes throughout the story of these games. Both games feature time progression, and that's where our main difference lies. Harvest Moon takes place over a 30-year period. There are 4 seasons per year, with each season lasting 10 days in-game. According to our clock, 10 minutes of the in-game time is approximately 7 seconds in real life. The player's journey and life is divided into chapters, which can be anywhere between 1 year long to 3 years. But most of these chapters have a time jump between them. Chapter 1 ends with the player getting married, and by chapter 2 you have a son. Chapter 2 lasts 2 years, and then in chapter 3 your son is approximately 7 years old. You follow the chapters until the player character dies, at which point you can go back and replay any chapter or just continue farming. A typical day in Stardew Valley lasts 18 hours in the game, from 6 to 12 AM. That translates to about 13 minutes in the real world, and also makes 10 minutes in the game 7 seconds in real life. You can stay up past midnight, but no matter what you do, the day automatically ends at 2 AM. Your character passes out from exhaustion and is taken home. You can also be penalized with a fine whenever you pass out. It's also worth noting that the only way to save in the game is by sleeping. If you stop playing midday, the day will restart the next time you go to play the game. Just like Harvest Moon, there are 4 seasons, but the seasons in Stardew Valley are 28 days long, and at the end of 2 years there's an event in the game to determine if you're a Stardew hero, but other than that there isn't really any set timeline in the game. You can play for as long as you like. The visuals. One of the most visible differences between the games is, well, the visuals. Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life is a fully 3D game with some really nice visuals. The characters and animals were modeled in a chibi style, with oversized heads and small bodies. Some fans of the series feel the chibi style is weird and creepy, but if you ask me, it's actually kinda charming and helps make the characters stand out, and to this day, they still look pretty good. It feels similar to how Wind Waker's cel-shaded design helped the visuals remain timeless. Looking back at the game, if anything hasn't aged well, it's the ground textures, but we're willing to give that a pass since it came out in 2003. Where A Wonderful Life really excelled was in the in-game lighting, though. Individual leaves cast shadows, the water is reflective, and even the sunrise and sunsets are beautiful. Again, keeping in mind that this was almost 15 years ago. On the other hand, Stardew Valley has top-down 2D pixel art that's reminiscent of games from the 80s. When you talk to the other characters, a pixel portrait of the character will come up on the screen. Another nice reference to older games. It might feel a little ironic that the newer game sports a more retro style, but pixel art has had a wonderful resurgence thanks to indie developers in games like Shovel Knight, Super Meat Boy, and Nidhogg. Stardew Valley is full of bright and saturated colors, which makes the world around you stand out. Also, since Stardew Valley is available on PC, if the visuals aren't to your speed, you can always download some mods to tweak them. Audio and music. To put it gently, Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life wasn't exactly praised for its audio design. There are very few sound effects in the game. You can hear the character's footsteps, water pouring from the watering can, digging dirt, and catching a fish, but there aren't many more sound effects other than that. Most actions that require a sound effect are represented by 2 other repeated sound clips. In addition, there's 1 song that loops endlessly in the game, or until you buy new songs. The official game soundtrack is just under an hour long, and there are 58 tracks. The game's audio was often the most critiqued aspect of the game, mostly because people felt that the repeating sounds became monotonous. The music in Stardew Valley, on the other hand, has been universally praised. All of the music in the game was made digitally with a piece of software called Propellerhead Reason. Eric Baroni loaded in all of the instruments and then composed them all in the program. The soundtrack has 70 tracks that span over 2 hours. Each season in the game has its own theme, and then each season also has multiple songs that play randomly throughout it so that the seasonal songs don't just loop every time you step outside. In between when songs are playing, ambient soundscapes tailored to each season fill the gaps. maps. The soundtrack for Stardew Valley is so popular that it's even available to buy on Steam and Amazon Music. For just $4.99, you too can listen to the soothing sounds of Pelican Town while you traipse through the snowy, barren, wintry prison that is your actual town. Since the seasonal music wasn't enough, there are also specific songs for locations, character events, and festivals, so it goes without saying that Eric Baroni put a ton of work into each track. Unique mechanics. Harvest Moon allows players to crossbreed plants and make their own seeds. Players need to take 2 seeds or crops to the talking plant tartan. The hybrid crops will grow faster than their parents and also typically sell for a higher price. Combine a carrot and a strawberry to get a caberry, or a melon and a potato to get a potamolo. Potamolo. You see, they're portmanteaus of each other. It's very cute. There are all sorts of unique crop combinations to be had, and no matter what you do, the hybrid crop will also be of a B quality seed, so don't waste those perfect S quality seeds on hybrids. Stardew Valley lacks this feature, but hybrids remind us of another farming sim, Animal Crossing, but that's a whole other video. In both Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley, you can collect items, but in Stardew Valley, you can use these materials to craft. From scarecrows to sprinklers to artisanal duck mayo, you can craft items to enhance your farm, and artisan items like cheese, truffle oil, and more will earn you a pretty penny. And speaking of sprinklers, they are a huge change to the game. The sprinklers automatically water adjacent tiles, so you don't have to individually water all the crops on your farm. With many farmers spending their mornings laboriously tending to their crops, the sprinklers are a revelation. They give farmers more time to kill that 4 millionth slime in the mine, or attempt to woo Penny, or rummage through George's garbage, or whatever you're into. In Harvest Moon, you have to water each crop individually, which can be quite annoying if you have a huge farm. Marriage and relationships. In both games, the townspeople around your farm are just as important as the farm itself. Just like your crops, they require a little bit of time and love every day. In both games, the player can get married to someone in the town, but marriage is very different in each one. There are 32 unique characters to befriend in Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life. The best way to build friendships is by giving gifts. Each character has particular gifts they like and dislike, so building relationships is fairly simple. If you want a character to like you, bring them something they like. The characters also each have their own unique story and tidbits about life in general, so they really help to flesh out the game. They all follow their own schedule, so the player has to figure out their movement patterns if they want to befriend people. And if you're lucky, some townsfolk will even give you gifts if you have a good enough relationship with them. And speaking of relationships, in Harvest Moon you can only marry one of 4 women in the game, and you have to get married in Harvest Moon by the end of the first year of the game, or the game ends. Marriage provides no real benefit other than propelling the plot of the game forward. However, your relationship with the townsfolk determines your child's possible career paths. The more positive relationships you have, the more possible careers your child can have in the game, which makes sense. They do always say it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. Your child can be a rancher, farmer, scholar, artist, musician, or athlete, depending on who you befriend in the game. Stardew Valley, not to be outdone, gave us 33 characters to befriend and 9 additional characters that you sadly cannot become friends with. Each villager has a friendship score represented by a meter with 10 hearts, with each heart representing 250 friendship points. And you can increase friendship points via dialogue, gifts, or quests. If you fill a friendship meter all the way, you'll be considered best friends with that character. The biggest difference is that friendship can decay in Stardew Valley. If you stop talking to characters, your friendship will slightly decrease unless their heart meter is already full. Villagers in Stardew Valley also have unique events called heart events. If you become close enough with a character, a special cutscene will ensue. As far as love and marriage goes, there are 12 possible suitors in the game, and players can marry any of these suitors regardless of gender. Marriage is completely optional, and you can even get divorced if things don't work out, but they'd still remain in town, so you'll probably have to skulk around and awkwardly avoid contact with them from that point forward. And relationships are more fleshed out as well. In Stardew Valley, your spouse will help around the farm by doing things like watering crops, feeding livestock, and making food. The future of the franchises. As for the future of these franchises, well, for Harvest Moon at least, it isn't looking so bright. Technically speaking, Harvest Moon does exist, but it's in the hands of a completely new development team now. The publisher of the games, Natsume, split from the developers Marvelous Interactive back in 2014 to make their own games. Natsume used to localize the Japanese franchise of games Bokujo Monogatari as Harvest Moon in the West. However, Marvelous Interactive is now working with a new publisher, Xseed Games, to localize the Bokujo Monogatari games instead. However, Natsume owns the right to the Harvest Moon moniker, so Marvelous Interactive and Xseed Games have been forced to call the games by a different name, Story of Seasons. So now, Story of Seasons is made by the developers of Bokujo Monogatari, which used to be the same as Harvest Moon, but now, Harvest Moon and Bokujo Monogatari have nothing to do with each other. Did you get all that? On the flip side, details about the next Stardew Valley game remain scarce. In a Reddit AMA, Baroni revealed that the next game he's making takes place in the same world as Stardew Valley, but was clear to say that it wasn't a sequel or expansion of Stardew Valley in any way. Baroni company later added that he would consider making a second Stardew Valley, but not for a bit, which means that you've got plenty of time to keep working on that farm of yours. Despite the confusion with the naming convention of the games now, the original creator of Harvest Moon, Yasuhiro Wada, is happy that Stardew Valley has come along. He feels that the spirit and memory of Harvest Moon lives on through Stardew Valley, and regardless of what game you prefer, you gotta admit, that's kinda heartwarming. Once again, I'm Jacob with the Leaderboard, and thanks for watching Harvest Moon vs. Stardew Valley. Let us know which game you prefer in the comments down below, whether it's Stardew or any version of the previous Harvest Moon games. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of our notification squad, and if you like getting more from your games, subscribe to the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts.